Bruce sat with his feet up on the coffee table. Caked mud and filth from the road fell off his boots onto the pristine surface. He smiled. Showing these prim and proper starchies who was boss was the best part of this fallen world. Men like him were made for it. He laid back and put his hands behind his head. He yelled, "Hey, Blondie, where's my grub? I'm starving here." A voice spoke from the kitchen. "It's coming, sugar. You're going to have to hold your horses." Bruce chuckled. This one was sassy. He liked them that way. Made it more fun when he beat it out of them. After he ate, he was going to teach her a thing or two about knowing her place. Him and his boys were going to show this whole community their place in this new world. The blonde walked out of the kitchen holding a tray of steaming food. She beamed at him. She said, "Dinner is served." She swatted his boots off the coffee table, scowling for a second at the dirt and filth, but returning to her chipper demeanor almost immediately. Bruce said, "Hey, watch it." "Sorry, Shug. Just making room for the spread." She began setting dishes of food on the table. She said, "We got a hot bowl of my world-famous tomato soup, crispy kettle chips, chipped beef grilled cheese sandwich, and my homemade blackberry wine." She set each item down as she named it. Bruce looked down her shirt as she leaned over the table. Blondie was stacked. He felt an itch in his groin. He licked his lips, but the aroma of the food in front of him mastered his lust. His mouth watered looking at the food. It was true his crew ate better than most, but it had been a long time since he had eaten a meal like this. Blondie was right. It was a spread. He wondered how this group had such good digs. Well, it didn't matter. It would all be there soon. He grabbed the sandwich and took a massive bite. Then another. It was amazing. He dipped it in the soup. Fantastic. He picked up the mason jar of blackberry wine and screwed the lid off. He drank greedily from it, dripping it down his chin. Blondie stood watching him with a grin on her face. She said, "Slow down, hun. Taste a little of it before you swallow." Bruce laughed. "Ha! This is damn good eats, Blondie. I'm so glad you like it. I've got plenty more when you're ready. I'll get you a napkin." She grabbed the tray and turned to leave. Bruce smacked her on the behind and said, "Thanks, babe." She jerked her head around and something flashed in her eyes. Bruce couldn't tell if it was anger, offense, or maybe something darker. He figured it was just that sass he liked. At any rate, it was gone as soon as it had come, and she was back to grinning from ear to ear. She said, "You silly man. My name's Queenie. Let me get you that napkin. You ready for seconds?" Actually, Bruce was ready. He finished off the wine and held the empty jar out to her. He said, "I could use another one of these, and bring me another one of them sandwiches." He winked and finished with, "Queenie." Queenie took the empty jar from him and smiled. "Coming right up." She walked into the kitchen. Bruce grabbed a handful of the kettle chips and threw them in his mouth. They were delicious. He yelled, "And I'm going to need some more of these chips too, doll." Queenie spoke from the kitchen. "You got it, Shug." Bruce could get used to this. Maybe he wouldn't report this community. Him and the boys could keep this place under the radar, make it their own little hideaway. It wouldn't be hard. This little suburb on the outskirts of the national forest was kind of remote. There was only one country road leading into it. Besides, there wasn't much of interest here. They didn't have any kids, and it was mostly chicks and elderly people living here. Plus, he could keep this hot little piece to himself. He was pretty sure she was into him. Queenie came back into the den carrying the tray. It held another sandwich, jar of wine, and a bigger bowl of chips. She had a napkin in her other hand. She set the food and wine on the table. Then she unfolded the napkin and spread it on his lap. She looked at him and winked. Oh yeah, she definitely wanted him. He felt a tingling between his legs. Actually, he felt tingling all over. He was definitely buzzing. This blackberry wine was good stuff. He grabbed the other jar and screwed the top off. He drank deeply from it, smacking his lips. Queenie stood over him with her arms crossed, smiling. She said, "It's good, isn't it? Drink some more, sweetie." He did. He gulped it in huge draughts. A warmth was spreading throughout his body. He was feeling good. He studied Queenie, leering at her breasts and following the curves of her body. He waved her towards him and said, "Why's are yous all over the way there? Come sit to me." Queenie laughed. "You want to try that again, Seller?" Bruce's head swam. Whoa, this wine had a kick to it. The warmth spreading through his body quickly turned to numbness. He swooned and swayed to one side. Felt like he was floating. Queenie was over him, stretching him out on the sofa. Gone was her beaming smile. It had been replaced by a gloating, sinister grin. Bruce couldn't feel anything. Not his arms, his legs. Oh God, not even his... Queenie leaned close to his face and said, "Feeling all right, Brucey? You look a little pukish." Bruce stuttered. "What do?" Queenie finished for him. What did I do to you?" "Oh, honey, I did what you wanted. I screwed you." She winked, turned, and walked away. Bruce tried to move, to call out, to feel something. He couldn't feel his tongue in his mouth. He couldn't even feel his hair. He stared at the ceiling, listening. He could hear Queenie's voice off in the distance. She was talking to someone. Who was it? Where were his men? Was this happening to them too? When he got off this couch, he was going to do things to this woman that would scar her for life. He was going to take his time. She would beg him to end it before he was through. But he wouldn't. He was going to make her his lifelong hobby. Something was happening. He was sliding off the couch. His head slumped forward as he hit the floor, and he could see two guys pulling him by the legs. They brought him to a chair on the other side of the room and sat him up. His head slumped to one side. Queenie stood across the room watching him, that infuriating grin on her face. She walked over to him and bent down so their faces were inches apart. She said, "I know what you're thinking. I could see it in your eyes. Planning what you're going to do to me when you get out of this." She chuckled and looked to the two men standing behind her. She said, "Should we give him a clue?" She ran her finger gently down his cheek and said, "Oh, sweetie, you ain't never getting out of here. We've been watching and waiting for you." She nodded her head. "That's right. We learned about you and your gang months ago." At the mention of his gang, she paused. "Oh, they're already dead, by the way, in case you were hoping they were going to save you. They had something much deadlier in their food. But I wanted something special for you, so we could have more time together." The news about his gang was crushing. He was hoping they would come and find him in this state and save his ass. Dead? All of them? Bruce began to panic. He might be totally paralyzed and show no outward sign of it, but in his mind he screamed at Queenie. He cursed her with 1,000 curses. She continued to taunt him. "We know you inform to the Fed remnants, and we know you even sell people to their work camps, you filthy skin trader." Queenie shook her head at him. Then a dark look came over her face. She said, "But it's the other work you do that justifies your punishment here tonight. Finding children for the disciples." She pulled out a knife and showed it to him. "I know you won't feel this now. You still have about 10 minutes of numbness left. But I want to show you something." To Bruce's horror, she reached up and cut off one of his ears. He didn't feel it, but she held it up for him to see. He screamed in his mind. This wasn't supposed to be happening. He was king in this world. He ruled the Starchies. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Queenie smiled. She said, "Oh, Brucey, in the next few hours, we're going to dry out those tear ducts. You're going to experience pain and hopelessness like no other. and you will never hurt another kid again." She gestured to the two men. "Let's get him in the shed, fellas. He'll be regaining feeling again soon." Bruce watched as the two men walked towards him. One of them produced a sack and placed it over his head. Everything went black. Queenie's voice spoke in his other ear. "Don't mess with the queen bee."